Disruptors are individuals that have revolutionized traditional industries by introducing innovative and unconventional ideas. These individuals have changed the status quo by reimagining the way things are done, and they have changed the game for everyone else. Their profiles, characters, and mindsets are unique and often set them apart. This is what makes this conversation both unique and fascinating. We have two disruptive leaders who share a passion for ideas and have decided to join forces to create a new educational institution that would change the way we understand a university from now on. Ricardo Salinas, a visionary who had a clear understanding of what consumers wanted, and he was not afraid to challenge the status quo and deliver it to them. Ricardo is also known for his intense focus on details and a passion for innovation. Ben Nelson, another disruptor who has challenged the traditional university system by introducing a new concept, the intentional university, designed to prepare students for success in a rapidly changing world, giving them the skills, knowledge, and connections they need to make a positive impact. They are both driven by a deep sense of purpose and a desire to make the world a better place through unconventional thinking and willingness to take risks. We will start this conversation by understanding the initial spark of the idea, creating a disruptive higher education institution. Ricardo, why you decided to launch a new university and why now?
Well, it's a long story, but it happens that I have been a victim of the current system and institutions. And I've seen my older children become victims too. And now that I have a younger brood of children, I thought, well, if I'm able to make a change and do something better for them, well, that would be a good idea. And then that took me on thinking, you know, if it's a good idea for my children, it should be a good idea for everybody else's children. It just happens that nobody's done it. So when I say being a victim of the current system, is so many young boys and girls that go into education and they just want to get out as soon as possible, you know. This is, ¿cuándo voy a acabar? When is this over? And I thought, gee, there's something really wrong with this because, at least from my perspective, learning is wonderful. And if you're in a learning environment, you don't want to get out, right? So there must be something wrong with the current institutional framework, and that's what got me started into doing something different. Different, better.
Ben, can you describe the original idea 10 years ago of Minerva and where it stands today?
Yeah, it's actually a coincidence, not just of the visions, but of the circumstance. Because I initially came up with the concept when I was an undergraduate, when I realized that my university—
You were suffering through that.
I was suffering through exactly what so many other students suffer through, sitting through pointless class after pointless class, cramming for a test, passing the test, and then forgetting everything that was on the test.
Of course.
And nobody cared.
But you're on your way to getting a title.
Exactly, you get the degree.
Certificate.
And if that's enough. And the education is irrelevant.
And by the way, then the degree also is irrelevant.
Exactly.
Because nobody looks at it.
Exactly, nobody looks at it. Exactly, it doesn't actually open the doors it was supposed to. And then, years and years later, as these ideas were still stewing in my mind, I find out from my wife that she's pregnant. And I was at a juncture in my career, and I realized, you know what? I really have to do something about this. And it was the same concept, except I had a perspective that it's going to take me a long time to get it done. So I said, okay, 18 years. That's what I would need in order to make sure that it comes together.
That's a whole life project.
Yeah, and I'd made it my life's work.
And how old is your son now?
My daughter is 11, almost 12.
So she's just getting into the tube here.
That's right. So she's starting. She's already wearing her Minerva gear. But it is fascinating to see how an entire generation now of students is aware of the same issues that I think we've been aware of for a while, and they're desperate to find something better.
You know, young people are not stupid. That's right. They know when they're wasting time. And you know, the social aspect of the university is also important, right? So what they do is they kind of bear the weight and the discouragement of wasting time in the educational process in order to gain the social aspect of life, right?
That's right.
But it shouldn't be like that. You have both of them.
Exactly. You know, when I was starting Minerva and I was initially finding backers, and I was talking to all of the graduates of Harvard and Stanford that are in all of the Silicon Valley funding offices, and I would talk about what I would do, and I would say, yes, we're going to build this incredible curriculum, and we're going to bring in students together, and they're going to live together, and I just looked at their puzzled faces, and at the end they said, look, I don't understand. Everybody knows you don't learn anything in college. It's all about who you meet. And I said, well, that's the problem. You need to do both. And it was so hard for them to even imagine that.
Yeah, because it's who you meet, and that's why there's such a fight, to get into the elite.
Yes.
Because then you're going to meet with the elite.
Yes.
But
that's right.
It doesn't add up.
Oh, and again, empirically, it doesn't add up. In fact, there have been studies that have shown that students that are admitted to elite universities and choose not to go wind up having the same life outcomes as those who chose to go. Right? And so it actually has very little to do with that network and has much more to do with just their raw capacity. And if you can actually add value and channel that raw capacity, provide a real education, and we've already seen that with Minerva graduates, they can do far, far better.
Every higher education institution reflects certain values and principles. We would now discuss the principles of freedom and what it means to take ownership of your learning and eventually of your own life.
It seems to me that the whole world is leaning towards this authoritarian structure where you're born in this place and then you are told to move to this place, and as long as you behave correctly, that you will be there. It seems to me a very disagreeable way of life, and I certainly wouldn't want my kids to live like that. So the opposite of authoritarianism is libertarianism, being fighting for liberty, fighting for freedom, and for two reasons, two important reasons. One is the moral aspect of it is what's right for human beings. What is right is that we should be free to choose the path that we want to have in life without being told what is better for you from a higher authority. So morally, I think that is the correct path. But then there's another aspect, which is just the practical aspect. This is what gives a better result. And we've seen this through different societies across the history of the human race. The societies that are free to initiate and to innovate have a better result than those who are structured vertically and everybody does what they're told. So the empirical, the results of being free is innovation, competition, and prosperity. So that's why we think that without the fundamental basis of freedom, we will not have a prosperous society. And that's why we put the name there on the university.
And again, it's remarkable. It is the exact same inspiration that was behind Minerva. If you think of a traditional university structure, and this is now going back from a European perspective, universities were instruments of the crown or of the cross, right? They were either training you to be a priest,
Yes.
or they were training you to be a subject of the king.
Right.
They were forcing you into fulfilling your role, not for your benefit, not for society's benefit, but for the benefit of the power structure that existed. And the idea of a liberal arts education, which people they don't understand the term.
No, they think
Right.
that it's going to study art. And
That's right. They think it's
culture,
art
right?
and poetry and things like that. The liberal arts are the disciplines, the arts that allow you to have liberty, that allow you to be free
By
as a
thinking.
person, by thinking and by participating in a society that is not governed by a monarch, that is governed by the people. Because being free comes with responsibility.
That's
You
an
have to
interesting
make a
definition of
decision.
liberal arts. I never heard that one.
People don't know about that. But that is where the term comes from.
It's like the liberal disciplines,
The liberal disciplines.
not the art in the sense of the poet and the sculpture and painting.
Exactly. And that's why the first liberal arts institutions that existed since Roman times, when they were initially conceived, were in the American colonies as they were starting to break free from the British crown. As they were thinking about how do you create a society where the people are sovereign. And one day you may be a merchant, but another day you may be a judge, right?
Right.
Or one day you may be a doctor, and
Or
the
a
next day
senator.
you're a senator or a diplomat,
Right.
right? And all of a sudden you realize that you needed to not only make decisions as a voter that affected your fellow students, you are the sovereign now, but you also had to have the responsibility of being able to change your career in the benefit of the society that you are helping to run. And that is the core element of freedom. And it's the core element of what a university education should be. And unfortunately, universities today are either in the European mold, be there to serve, right, whoever the power structure is, or frankly, the Americans have abandoned the liberal arts tradition and are really a degraded version of the European model where they don't actually study subjects that much and then have a smattering of other things, right? And this opportunity to create a university that is centered on freedom, that gives the individuals the tools they need to be effective participants and leaders in society, it's just a unique opportunity.
Well, wasn't it Gramsci that said that you had to co-opt the intellectuals if you want to take over power? I think it was. Well, Antonio Gramsci. But I was wondering, now that you were saying this about the American universities, what power are they serving? How, I mean, we know America is controlled by the military-industrial complex, period, in this story. So are these universities serving that complex?
Well, think about it. When I went to Wharton as an undergraduate, right, you think Wharton is known as the #1 business school in the world, right? And you would imagine, oh, business. You train people to be productive producers of business in society. What happened to Wharton graduates, right? 50% of them went to become bankers, 40% of them went to become consultants, and maybe 10% were working in consumer packaged goods or other things, but also in a consultative approach. No one was learning to build anything. No one was learning to actually participate in society, right? And that is the reality of who they serve. It is the entrenched power structures that aren't necessarily the most productive in society. They're just the ones that are the most extractive.
Big business, which is already in place here.
Well, and it's not even, I wouldn't even mind so much if it was big business. It was really big service to business, right? And so it was actually firms that would take money out of private enterprise, line their own pockets, and
In the
not really add
consulting
any
business.
value, right?
That's interesting. We'll have to get into that further on.
Absolutely.
Our next point of reflection is going to be around legacy. Legacy is not just what you have accomplished, but it also means what you stood up and the values that you have upheld. Your vision will now become a connection between emotion, attitudes, and mindset for future generation. In which sense do you see that this new university reflects on your legacy?
Legacy for me means leaving stuff in a better shape than they were when I came around. So how can I? It means this respecting this intergenerational pact. which is implicit in society, and that says that your children should be better off than what you were. I think that's the intergenerational pact. Now, better off not only in the economic sense, but also in the intellectual, educational, a more fully formed human being. And I think that's very nice. You know, it's how you have human progress across time, and we've seen enormous human progress. You know, in the past 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, things have changed for the better dramatically. And now that's a challenge for us too, because if we want this to continue, we're going to work hard, because odds are it can get worse easier than it can get better. And you know, this is a very well-known syndrome in families, where they say that the strong, the difficult times create strong men, and strong men create easy times, and easy times create weak men, and weak men create difficult times. So it's all a cycle, you know? And the better it gets, the easier it is for juniors to screw up.
Yeah.
So hopefully we are doing this educational institution, Universidad, Libertad, to ensure that the future generations don't screw up, you know, and that they remember what is it that brought them here, and what is it that they should do themselves to ensure that future generations have a chance like they have.
You know, in reflecting on that, and I think about the legacy I would love to have, and really that Minerva is all about, it is about that process. It is about shifting global consciousness of what education is, as centered on wisdom, as opposed to centered on information, right? Because this has been the most elusive thing over the years, right? It's the ability for those generations that have struggled and learned the hard lessons of life to be able to pass it on to the next generation, right? We think of wisdom as the purview of, you know, those who have suffered.
Old
and
guys
learned.
like us.
Old, exactly, exactly, the aged, right? And for whatever reason, we've never been able to find a process in humanity to pass on wisdom to the young. And this really is the core of the Minerva movement.
But also, you mentioned a very interesting difference. One thing is wisdom, and one thing is information.
Yeah.
Because now, for the first time in humanity, we have so much information at our hands. It's just not a problem, right?
Right.
Through these mobile devices, you can access any information that has been accumulated across human existence, and you don't have to be there. You know, it used to be that you had to go
That's right.
to Washington if you want to consult the Library of Congress, and they had these, you know, huge halls with all the accumulated knowledge or information.
Yeah.
But you had to be there.
That's right.
And now you can be anywhere in the world and access that information. So access to information is definitely not the challenge anymore.
That's right.
It's what you're going to do with the information.
That's right.
Which involves character and wisdom.
That's right. And artificial intelligence can not only access that information, it can process it.
And,
right?
and they can present it in a way that sounds much better than any graduate student, right?
That's right. And this is really where the moment comes for education, because artificial intelligence is doing two things to expose the rot of traditional higher education. Number one, it's demonstrating that, yes, this AI chatbot is able to pass tests that are the certification mechanism of traditional universities.
So let's do that slowly again.
Yeah.
This chat GPT
Yes.
will pass a university test.
Correct. It is already passing graduate level tests in business and medicine,
Bang.
right? And it's the first version, and it's getting, you
So
know,
what do we tell the young guys who are sitting there in that courses?
they don't need to be there. and that's really the key, right? But the second thing that ChatGPT does, and this is, I think, something that has not really been discussed, is that ChatGPT learns from the convention. It takes as its data everything that is out there.
Printed, written.
That's right. All of the written words, some videos, etc. But it goes and reflects the orthodox perspective. it doesn't imagine the future. It doesn't analyze the merit of an argument that isn't in consensus, but is derived from first principles. And so if you provide students the wisdom, the ability to think in a first principle way, it doesn't matter if their perspectives are heterodox. It doesn't matter if they come to a conclusion that is reasoned and different than conventional wisdom, because in all reality, most conventional understandings are not wise, right? And wisdom needs to be brought from the ground up. That is the role of the future university, and it's the crucial role for humanity, because otherwise we're going to be in a self-referential loop, just repeating and staying static, right, with answers that are just commonly known and never thinking about what comes next.
But that also, it seems to me that your argument underlines one of the main problems of the institutional framework for universities, is that you're supposed to learn the same stuff and you're supposed to parrot it back in the same way, and then you'll get your grades and then you'll get a degree.
Right.
That's the whole point of the system.
That's right.
You go there to learn this and talk like this.
And think in a very particular way.
Right.
Right.
And now, this thinking outside the box is not to be encouraged.
Right. Because it might lead you to a non-traditional perspective. It might lead you to innovate. And universities are not engines of innovation.
No.
They really are engines of status quo.
Wow. So it's not a coincidence that the universities in general are run by these priesthoods.
That's right.
An actual priest like we have here, many universities that are run by the clergy, many of them, for historical reasons.
Right.
And then the ones that are not religious, they have their own priesthood based on ideology.
And let me give you a real live example of the comparison. Stanford, as an example, is known as a hotbed of entrepreneurialism.
Yeah.
Right? And yet, if you look at it historically, only 0.8%, less than 1% of Stanford graduates have started funded startups. That's it, right? And frankly, one could argue that the percentage is not that much higher than other universities. It really is because they're in Silicon Valley. So it's highly questionable how much Stanford has to do with it. Minerva, which our first graduates have graduated less than 4 years ago, and is not a school of entrepreneurship. It is just a school of systematic thought. 12% of our graduates have started funded startups. 12%, 15 times the rate at the most established startup producing university in the world.
Wow.
And that is the difference between an organization that is focused on the status quo versus an organization that's focused on principled and first principles thinking.
That's amazing, Ben. However, I think we have to be careful in talking to young people and not to create false expectations, I think that entrepreneurship and startups are great. I mean, I love that stuff. That's what I do. But I also realize that not all people want to do that.
Correct.
Or are capable of doing that.
Absolutely.
This is like a professional sport,
That's right.
I mean, we might love baseball, but not everybody gets to play in the big leagues, right?
That's
or
right.
we might love golf, but we can't make the cut, right?
And 88% of our graduates find impact in ways that are not entrepreneurial,
Exactly.
which is crucial.
Exactly. So
That's right.
it's nice to love the sport,
Yeah,
but it's another thing to play professional.
that's right.
You have to have other qualifications to be a professional entrepreneur.
Indeed.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Not easy for the kids.
I think we can attest to that from experience.
Yeah, because so many institutions now are talking about generating entrepreneurs. Well, that would be great, but it's like, how are we going to generate top-notch soccer players? Like we have that problem right now.
Yeah.
Where are we going to get them?
Right.
It's not easy. because they require a certain mindset and some physical faculties and an attitude towards life that is not common at all.
That's right.
So,
Absolutely. I love it.
In today's rapidly changing business landscape, an innovative entrepreneur is someone that is able to adapt and thrive in uncertainty and ambiguity. Do you think that these values of freedom, the power of ideas, the purpose, your legacy, would that be a recipe for success for the next generation?
you know more about that than I do.
Well, I think it really relates to the same thing. I think it is first principles thinking. A world that is uncertain isn't uncertain on its core bases, right? You still, in an uncertain world, have claims and you have facts. You still have the ability to think through decision trade-offs, right? And how you think through the kind of analysis that you need. You still have data and statistics. That's all the same. The principles are the same. It's the context that switches. And so the key is a university that is focused not on a particular context, because those contexts will change, right? It is the ones that is focused on the underlying principles and being able to apply it, right? And whether it is through entrepreneurship or business or scholarship or actually having a public impact on culture, those are all ways where systematic thinking is always wins. And we can think about all of the people we know in history, right? All the ones that we study, they're ones that mastered core ideas and adapted them to a new context.
Yeah. It's very interesting. You know, our good friend and advisor, Dr. Isaac Cadices, has written a lot about organizational change and how to adapt. And he has a very nice phrase. He said, the only place where there's no change is when you're pushing flowers in the
ground.
Cemetery. You're pushing daisies from the cemetery. That's where there's no change. So life is a continuous change all the time. Life brings change. And change creates problems. And problems demand actions, and actions create more change. So we might as well face it.
Yeah.
We're in the changing world, and we will be. And I think it's very pernicious when some people or institutions resist change. It's impossible. So things will change. Instead of wanting to control change or to minimize change, we should embrace change.
Absolutely.
So I think that needs to be taught also.
Without question.
Finally, I would like to start closing this conversation with your ideas about the future, more specifically about future scenarios. And I have two questions for that. Do you envision that these future scenarios will continue to evolve in a way that this university becomes relevant? And why would anybody think about joining Universidad de la Libertad for their future success?
Well, as we were discussing with Ben, you can do more of the same and get more of the same. So if you want to be in an institution where you're bored and you want to leave and you want to finish and you want to get done with it, please continue with the current institutions. Now, if you want to have a different take on life, a different, better take on life, where you're constantly learning and you need to adapt to different circumstances, and where you can learn at your own pace, and you can mingle with other people from other different parts of the world and work and learn and all the same together, then you should definitely look at Universidad, Libertad or Minerva, no? Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I think that there's a harsh realization about the current status quo, which is physics is taught at Harvard the exact same way that it is taught at the lowest ranked university in the world.
Same thing.
The same thing. It's a pure commodity. And in fact, you can go department by department. Economics, business, medicine, it's all exactly the same. So what does universities differentiate on? Only their brand. That's it. only who they're able to attract to begin with. Programs like these are based on a premise that it's not just brand that matters. Education actually matters. If you actually find a better way to educate, to actually create processes by which students can take what they're learning and apply it in a better way, that is going to be the differentiation, not just when you graduate, but years after you graduate. I think what you said is exactly right. If all you want is a piece of paper, you are spoiled for choice.
Yeah.
You can get a piece of paper at any institution you want.
Yeah.
Right?
You can even have one made up.
That's right.
In Santo Domingo.
That's exactly right.
We have a very famous place where you counterfeit titles. You know?
Yeah, just
go.
Go and get it done, right? I think we have a politician in the United States who's made up his degrees, and he's now in the House of
don't even get into that. We have
Representatives.
a sitting judge of the Supreme Court who has a...
So you could do that. That's easy. But if you want to get an education, right, that is a decision which has actually very few options, real options. And that's really what we're trying to provide here.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll be successful, because you never know. But again, you know, action creates change, and change creates problem, and problems need more action. So we'll iterate until we get it right.
Exactly.
And it's not going to be right at the first day. Of course not. So what? We fix it, right?
That's exactly. You know, this is one of the things I learned in very, very early in my at Minerva. We had a small pilot class, 25 students, and one of them, Guilherme from Brazil, who is now the CEO of a very well-funded company, 3.5 years after he graduated from Minerva. He came up to me one day, and he transferred from the #1 ranked university in Brazil into Minerva, started over. And he came to me and he said, Ben, you know, we're giving you so much feedback that students that are going to come next year are going to have a 5 times better education than I'm getting. And I said, yeah, that's true, Guilherme. He says, you know, but that's okay, because I'm getting a 10 times better education than I got at the previous university I was in. Right? And so the key is, you always want to get better, but you're starting at a level that's so far better than anything else that's out there. And that's what is going to ensure that the university delivers on its promise to students from day one, even though the institution is going to get better and better and better over time.
Yes, that's why I like that phrase from Newton. No? It says that if we have been able to see farther, it's because we've been standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these new generations get a much better head start.
That's right.
Amazing.
As a closing statement, I would like to get your arguments as to why, for the young generation, would become relevant to decide either joining a traditional university or becoming part of Universidad de la Libertad, disrupting the way they learn.
Yeah, life is a huge adventure, and we have been fortunate in being able to start this kind of initiative at this advanced old age. So perhaps with all the accumulated knowledges and advantages that we have today, we might be able to pull this off that nobody else has been able to do, you know, because certainly I'm sure some people have tried, you know, but I think that we have a very good chance of changing education for the better in a fundamental way.
I will leave with one thought for anybody who's thinking about Libertad as an opportunity for them. There's my favorite piece of research ever was done by a man named Richard Wiseman, like the name too. And he set out to understand what is luck. And he created these experiments that I'm not going to get into, but that started with asking people, do they consider themselves to be lucky or not? And what he found out is overwhelmingly, the people that said that they considered themselves to be lucky people,
they get lucky,
had 2 characteristics that the people who said that they were unlucky didn't have. They were observant, meaning they saw things around them that the unlucky people didn't see,
That-
and they took action based on what they observed.
Very
And he
interesting.
scientifically proved that luck is the combination of being able to see things that normal or unlucky people don't see, and doing something about it. And my
Richard
hope is-
Wiseman.
Richard Wiseman, and my hope is that people who are now being exposed to the idea of Libertad, the idea of a better institution, are going to not only take advantage of being aware of it, but that we'll do something about it.
That's a very good closing thought, Ben. And I've always said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. But it's a fact that you need to feel lucky.
Yeah,
That's a fact in business.
that's right.
And I'm a walking testimony of that. So
And my guess is you've pretty good observational powers.
absolutely. Yeah, being situationally aware improves your chances of luck a lot. Yeah. So there you got it. Man. Who wants to join?
It has been a fascinating discussion, two disruptors, and a future that would really change the way we understand universities from now on. Thank you for this conversation.